What's the dumbest rule you had to follow in your school? Principal Lynch padlocked every student bathroom during class time after someone vandalized a stall. He only unlocked it during passing periods and lunch. I have Crohn's disease, which means when I need a bathroom, I need it immediately, or I'll crap myself in class. The first week of locked bathrooms, I had to run to the nurse's office 3 times. Other kids were peeing in water bottles and throwing them away. One girl bled through her pants when her period started unexpectedly. But Principal Lynch didn't care about our emergencies or my doctor's orders. He said if we didn't like it, we could transfer schools. The janitor felt sorry after seeing me cry outside the locked bathroom door, cramping so bad I couldn't stand up straight. He accidentally dropped his bathroom key one day when I was desperately banging on the door, then walked away for just long enough for me to make a clay impression of it during art class. I got a copy made at the hardware store where my cousin worked, and suddenly I could use the bathroom without destroying my social life. I kept the key hidden in my shoe and only used it during absolute emergencies. I'd slip out during class, unlock it, do what I needed to do, and lock it back up. Nobody knew I had it, not even my best friends. I couldn't risk the principal finding out. For 3 months, I managed my Crohn's in secret. I learned which teachers wouldn't notice if I slipped out, which bathrooms were closest to which classrooms, how to move through the halls without being seen by cameras. I kept Imodium and wet wipes in every backpack pocket and had spare underwear in my locker. But then, during final exams week, Principal Lynch announced that bathrooms would stay locked even during passing periods to maximize testing time. We got one scheduled bathroom break at 10 a.m. where they'd unlock them for exactly 3 minutes, somehow expecting all 600 students in the school to get their business done in 180 seconds. I'd taken a ton of Imodium that morning to make sure I wouldn't need my key during the tests, but Crohn's doesn't care about your plans. During the chemistry final, my intestines started cramping so bad I couldn't read the questions. That familiar, urgent pressure built up, the kind that meant I had maybe 2 minutes before I'd crap myself in front of 40 kids. I knew it was futile, but I raised my hand and asked to use the bathroom anyway. My teacher said I knew the rule, and bathrooms wouldn't open for another hour. I tried my luck again and told him I had Crohn's disease, that this was a serious medical emergency. He said I should have gone during the scheduled break. The cramps were getting worse, sweat pouring down my face. I stood up and started pulling out the doctor's notes from my bag, trying to walk to the front with my glute muscles working overtime. But the teacher dismissed me entirely. Anyone can fake a doctor's note. You're not going to the bathroom so you can cheat. I told him I would leave my phone beside him. You probably have the answers written on your thighs. That's when I lost it. I screamed that I was going to crap myself right here if I couldn't get to a bathroom. The whole class was now staring at me, but my teacher told me to get back to my seat and sit down, or I'd get a 0 on the final. I thought about my hidden key, and how there was no way to secretly slip out like I usually did. Using it now would mean exposing the secret that had saved me for 3 months, but I could feel everything about to let go. My body had given up the fight. I had 2 choices: become that kid forever, or reveal my key and face whatever came next. It wasn't really a choice. I pulled the key from my shoe and ran out of the room, my teacher yelling after me. I made it to the bathroom just in time, my body exploding the second I sat down. The relief was overwhelming, but I knew I'd just exposed my secret. I stayed in that stall for 10 minutes, partly because Crohn's doesn't let you leave quickly, and partly because I didn't want to face what was waiting for me outside. When I finally came out, Principal Lynch was standing in the hallway with my teacher. They'd clearly been listening to me destroy that toilet for the past 10 minutes, which would have been humiliating if I wasn't already beyond caring. Principal Lynch held out his hand for the key, and I gave it to him. Principal Lynch walked me to his office with the confiscated key in his hand. He sat down at his desk and pulled out an expulsion form, filling in my name at the top. Breaking and entering, possession of stolen property, and cheating on your final exam by leaving without permission, he said, not even looking up. I'm also calling the police since this key technically makes you a thief. How long have you been breaking into my bathrooms? I sat there frozen while Principal Lynch picked up his desk phone and started dialing the non-emergency police line. My hands gripped the wooden armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. He told whoever answered that he had a student who'd been breaking into school property for months using an illegally obtained key. My stomach started cramping again, but this time it wasn't the Crohn's. It was pure terror making my insides twist up. The reality of what was happening hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just detention or suspension anymore. He was actually calling the cops on me. I tried to interrupt him, my voice coming out all shaky as I asked if I could please call my parents and see the nurse because I was still having a medical emergency. Principal Lynch put his hand over the phone and told me this was a discipline issue now, not a health matter, and I'd call my parents after the police arrived. My whole body was shaking at this point. The door opened and Linnea Truven walked in, our school resource officer who usually just dealt with kids vaping in the bathrooms. She listened to Principal Lynch explain how I'd been using a stolen key to break into locked bathrooms for months, violating school security protocols. Then she held up her hand to stop him. She looked at me sitting there, pale and sweaty and obviously sick, then back at Principal Lynch. She said this sounded more like an internal school matter than criminal theft, especially considering she'd just heard me destroying that bathroom for 10 minutes straight from a medical emergency. Principal Lynch's face went red, but he hung up the phone. Without missing a beat, he pulled out a different form from his desk drawer and started filling out emergency removal paperwork instead. He declared me suspended effective immediately pending a formal disciplinary hearing next week. His face was getting redder by the second, clearly pissed that Officer Truven had overruled him about calling the actual cops. He called my chemistry teacher on the classroom phone and told him to escort me back to get my belongings. The walk back to the chemistry room was the longest walk of my life. Every kid in the hallway stared at me being escorted like some kind of criminal. When we got to the classroom door, my teacher opened it and 40 heads turned to look at me. I heard someone whisper, "Cheater," as I grabbed my backpack from under my desk. Another kid said, "Bathroom key," loud enough for everyone to hear. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely zip up my bag. My face felt like it was on fire from the humiliation. The whole class was watching me pack up my stuff, knowing I'd just failed the final and gotten suspended. My mom showed up at the office within 20 minutes, still in her work scrubs from the hospital. Her face went through about 10 different emotions as Principal Lynch explained explained the stolen property and breaking and entering charges he was filing with the school board. He made it sound like I was some kind of criminal mastermind instead of a sick kid who just needed to use the bathroom. The car ride home was completely silent for the first 5 minutes. Then my mom started asking questions about the key, how long I'd had it, why I never told her. I could tell she was processing everything, trying to figure out if she should be mad at me for keeping secrets or mad at the school for making me so desperate in the first place. Once we got home, all the adrenaline that had been keeping me going just crashed. My Crohn's went into overdrive from all the stress, and I spent the next 3 hours running back and forth between the bathroom and the couch. I was so dehydrated I could barely stand up. My dad got home from work, and I could hear my parents talking in hushed voices in the kitchen, trying to figure out what to do next. That evening around 7, my mom's phone dinged with an email from the school. The official disciplinary charges were all listed out like I was indicted or something. Breaking and entering, possession of stolen property, academic dishonesty for leaving during an exam, and disrupting the testing environment. They'd scheduled my hearing for the following Thursday. My mom pulled up my grades online, and there it was. A big, fat 0 for my chemistry final, with a note from my teacher about leaving without permission during testing. My whole semester grade had tanked from a B+ to a D. My parents kept asking me where I got the key, how I made the copy, who helped me. They asked the same questions over and over in different ways, like they were trying to catch me in a lie. But I wasn't going to rat out the janitor who'd shown me the only kindness I'd gotten at that school. I told them I found the key on the ground one day and got a copy made at some random hardware store. I knew refusing to give them more details made my case harder, made me look guiltier, but I wasn't going to throw the one person who helped me under the bus. My phone started buzzing non-stop with texts from classmates. My best friend heard I'd been escorted out for cheating and wanted to know if it was true. There's something deeply wrong with a principal who'd rather call the police on a sick kid than admit his bathroom policy is hurting students. Lynch knew about the medical issues, saw the doctor's notes, heard what happened in that bathroom, but still tried to make. Other kids were spreading rumors about me breaking into the school at night, dealing drugs in the bathrooms, all kinds of crazy stuff that had nothing to do with reality. I kept my responses super vague, just saying there was a misunderstanding and I'd be back next week. I didn't trust anyone with the real details because I knew anything I said would get back to Principal Lynch somehow. Kids were already picking sides, some saying I was a cheater who deserved to get expelled, others saying the bathroom policy was messed up to begin with. That night I couldn't sleep, so I grabbed my laptop and started Googling everything about student rights and medical conditions. I typed in school bathroom access Crohn's disease and found tons of articles about Section 504 plans and the Americans with Disabilities Act. My eyes got wide, reading that schools legally have to provide reasonable accommodations for students with documented medical conditions. They couldn't just lock bathrooms and ignore doctor's notes. I bookmarked page after page of legal requirements and parent advocacy sites, feeling like maybe we had a real chance to fight this. I stayed up until 3 in the morning taking notes on everything, my fingers cramping from typing so much. First thing when I woke up, I called my GI doctor's emergency line while my mom was in the shower. The receptionist took down all the details about what happened with the bathroom key and the suspension. I explained how Principal Lynch had been denying bathroom access for months and how I'd been forced to make a key just to manage my Crohn's. She said the doctor would call back as soon as possible and they'd write the strongest letter they could about my medical needs. My hands were shaking when I hung up because I knew this was getting serious now. My mom came out of her room, already on her phone, pacing back and forth while she typed an email to the school. She was demanding an immediate meeting with someone named Laurel Ridgens, who apparently was the 504 coordinator at our school. Mom's face was red and she kept stopping to add more details about how the school's failure to accommodate my medical condition had caused this whole mess. She hit send so hard I thought she might crack her phone screen. Within 2 hours, Laurel Ridgens emailed back saying she could meet with us tomorrow afternoon at 2. Her message was really careful, using words like reviewing relevant policies and examining documentation, which made my mom snort, but also seemed better than getting ignored completely. Mom immediately started gathering all my medical records and doctor's notes from the past 3 years, spreading them across the kitchen table in neat piles. The next day, we walked into Laurel's office, and she had this huge binder open on her desk already. She kept nodding while my mom talked, writing notes and highlighting different sections in her paperwork. Laurel said she understood my medical needs were real and documented, but she kept glancing at her office door like she was worried someone might be listening. She explained she was stuck between testing security rules and pressure from the administration, which basically meant Principal Lynch was making her life hard too. Her hands kept moving papers around nervously, and she lowered her voice when she mentioned that other students had also complained about the bathroom policy. Right after we got home, my doctor's office called, and the nurse said they were writing the strongest letter possible about my condition. She asked me tons of questions about my flare patterns, how often I needed the bathroom during school, and every single time I'd been denied access. I gave her dates and times I could remember, like when I'd almost had an accident during the state testing last year. She said the letter would make it crystal clear that denying bathroom access could cause serious medical problems, or even land me in the hospital. The doctor himself got on the phone for a minute just to say they'd back us up completely. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email notification from my chemistry teacher sent to my parents. He was insisting the 0 on my final had to stand because making exceptions would be unfair to other students. He actually wrote that anyone could fake a medical emergency to cheat on exams, like my Crohn's was just some excuse I made up. My mom read it out loud and threw her phone on the couch, then picked it back up to forward it to Laurel with a message about discrimination. Later that evening, I was scrolling through social media when I got a message from someone named Imogen Groverson. She said she was a student journalist writing about the bathroom lock policy and how it was affecting kids with medical conditions. She'd heard about my suspension through other students and wanted to know if I'd comment for her article. I stared at the message for a long time, not sure if talking to her would help or make things worse. My mom said it was my choice, but maybe getting the story out there could put pressure on the school. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything, so I started making a list of every bathroom emergency I'd had since September. I tried to remember which hallways had cameras and whether any footage footage would show me using the key. I mapped out the times I'd slipped out of class, which bathrooms I'd used, which days I'd been really sick. The paranoia hit me hard when I realized how much energy I'd spent the last 3 months just trying to hide my bathroom visits. I'd memorized teacher schedules, camera angles, and which doors squeaked. All that work just to manage a medical condition that should have been accommodated in the first place. Laurel called that afternoon to say she was starting the 504 evaluation paperwork, but warned it usually took weeks to process. She sounded frustrated, explaining that the bureaucracy meant it wouldn't be done before my disciplinary hearing next week. She promised to note in my file that the process had been started and said that might help with the suspension. Mom asked if there was any way to speed it up, but Laurel just sighed and said the district had its procedures. The next morning, a certified letter arrived requiring my signature. Inside was a formal no-contact directive from Principal Lynch, stating I was banned from all school property during my suspension, except for the disciplinary hearing next week. The letter went on for 2 pages about how I'd violated the trust of the school community and posed a safety risk to other students. My hands shook reading the part where he called my bathroom key a tool for criminal activity. Mom took photos of every page while Dad started making notes in the margins about how ridiculous each claim was. I spent the rest of that day at the kitchen table writing out everything that had happened since the bathroom locks started. Every time I'd asked to use the bathroom and been told no. Every accident I'd barely avoided by running to the nurse. Every time I'd shown my doctor's note to teachers who said it didn't matter. Dad helped me organize it all into a timeline with dates and times, printing out attendance records to show which classes I'd missed for bathroom emergencies. We highlighted the 3 times I'd actually crapped myself a little before getting the key, something I'd never told my parents about before. Mom spent hours on the phone with the district office trying to get answers about the bathroom policy. The administrator kept saying individual schools could set their own safety procedures and wouldn't answer her direct questions about medical accommodations. She asked to speak to someone higher up, but got transferred to 3 different voicemails. When she finally reached someone in the legal department, they said they couldn't discuss ongoing disciplinary matters and hung up. My GI doctor called that afternoon for our scheduled consultation, and Mom put him on speaker. He couldn't believe what he was hearing about the locked bathrooms and started using medical terms I'd never heard before. He explained how holding it could cause intestinal damage and increase inflammation, making my Crohn's worse. He promised to write the strongest letter possible and have it notarized by the end of the day. I pulled up my health app and started downloading 3 months of symptom logs while he was still on the phone. The data showed I'd had urgent bathroom needs at least 4 times a week, sometimes multiple times a day during flares. Each entry had timestamps, showing these weren't predictable or something I could schedule around bathroom breaks. My phone buzzed with an email from Laurel saying she'd formally requested interim bathroom accommodations for me, but Principal Lynch had declined. She'd attached his response where he said all decisions about accommodations would wait until after the disciplinary hearing. Her frustration showed through her professional language when she wrote that this seemed to violate federal guidelines, but the district wouldn't override him. That evening, Imogen posted her article about the bathroom locks on the school newspaper website, and it immediately started getting shared everywhere. She'd interviewed the girl who'd bled through her pants, several kids who admitted to using bottles, and even got a quote from a janitor about finding containers of pee in trash cans. The article didn't use my name, but mentioned a student with a documented medical condition who'd been suspended for finding their own solution. Within an hour, the article had over 500 shares, and parents were commenting about calling the school board. A group chat started with kids planning to all ask for bathroom passes at exactly 10:15 tomorrow morning in protest. I wanted to message them support, but knew I couldn't risk looking like I was organizing anything from off campus. I just liked their posts quietly and watched the plan spread through different friend groups. Principal Lynch calling a bathroom key a tool for criminal activity might be the most creative way anyone's ever described basic human needs. Someone give this man a prize for turning bodily functions into conspiracy theories. Principal Lynch must have been monitoring social media because a school-wide email went out that night doubling down on the bathroom policy. He wrote that the locks would remain through the end of the semester for safety and that any coordinated disruptions would result in immediate suspension for all participants. He specifically mentioned social media organizing as grounds for disciplinary action. The email ended with a reminder that parents concerned about the policy could explore other educational options for their children. Dad drove to the school the next morning to meet with Percy Conway about my makeup exams, while Mom stayed home to help me organize more documentation. Percy kept Dad waiting for 40 minutes before finally seeing him in his tiny office next to the main office. Dad said Percy wouldn't commit to anything about makeup exams, kept saying everything depended on the hearing outcome. When Dad pushed about me potentially failing classes through no fault of my own, Percy just kept deferring to Principal Lynch's authority and repeating that suspended students weren't entitled to makeup work. Dad came home furious, saying Percy acted like a robot programmed to protect the principal. 2 days later, the official hearing notice showed up in our mailbox, thick envelope with the school district logo that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Mom read it over my shoulder while I scanned the charges, and there it was in black and white: possession of stolen property, breaking and entering, disrupting the testing environment. But the worst part was seeing the janitor's name on the witness list, knowing they might make him testify about his missing key. I spent the whole night thinking about how he'd helped me when nobody else would, and now his job might be on the line because of it. The next morning, I biked to the hardware store where my cousin worked, hoping to catch the janitor since I knew he went there for supplies sometimes. I waited outside for an hour pretending to look at garden tools until I saw him walking up with a list in his hand. He saw me and nodded toward the alley beside the building, and we stood there between the dumpsters while he told me not to worry about him, that he'd been at that school 20 years and could handle himself. I started to explain that I could tell them the truth about him dropping the key, but he cut me off and said we both needed to stick to the story, that I found it somewhere, that neither of us knew how the other was involved. He looked tired and older than I remembered, and when he walked away, I felt worse than before. That afternoon, Linnea showed up at our house in regular clothes, not her uniform, and sat with my parents at the kitchen table table while I listened from the stairs. She explained that criminal charges were really unlikely for a kid with a medical condition who just needed a bathroom, that the district probably wouldn't back the principal if this went to court. She couldn't promise anything officially, but she kept using words like reasonable and proportionate response, which made Mom relax her shoulders for the first time in days. She mentioned that several school board members were already asking questions about the bathroom policy, and one of them had a grandkid with diabetes who needed bathroom access too. Saturday, Mom dragged me grocery shopping, and halfway through picking out cereal, my intestines started that familiar cramping. I speed walked to the back of the store where the bathrooms were, but the employee stocking shelves said they were for employees only, even when I explained I had Crohn's and this was an emergency. Mom found me doubled over by the pharmacy, trying not to cry from the pain and frustration, and she marched that employee to the manager's office and didn't leave until they unlocked that bathroom for me. Sitting on that toilet, cramping and sweating, I thought about how this would be my whole life, begging for bathroom access like I was asking for some huge favor instead of a basic human need. Monday's mail brought a thick envelope from my GI doctor's office, 2 full pages describing Crohn's disease in detail that made me squirm just reading it. He explained how the urgency works, how I might have less than 30 seconds warning before an accident, how stress makes flares worse, and how denying bathroom access could cause serious medical complications. The best part was where he wrote about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, using phrases like discrimination against students with disabilities and failure to provide reasonable accommodations. Dad highlighted that whole section with yellow marker and made 3 copies. Tuesday after school, Laurel met us in the empty library and helped turn the doctor's letter into a specific list of accommodations I'd need. She typed while Mom and I talked, formatting everything with bullet points and official-looking headers, even though she reminded us she couldn't approve anything while I was suspended. The list included unlimited bathroom access without asking permission, extended time on tests with bathroom breaks, permission to carry medication and supplies, and a permanent hall pass for emergencies. She printed 5 copies and told us to bring them to the hearing, then pulled out her personal phone and texted someone, saying she knew people at the district office who should see this. Wednesday, Imogen called our house, asking if I'd give her a quote for her follow-up article about the whole situation. I kept it short and focused on the medical stuff, saying students with health conditions needed bathroom access and that holding it could cause real harm. She asked if I wanted to say anything about the principal or the punishment, but I stuck to talking about Crohn's and how bathroom access wasn't optional for kids like me. The article went online Thursday morning, and by lunch, there were over 200 comments that I tried not to read but couldn't help myself. Some people called me a spoiled brat who thought rules didn't apply to him, saying I should have just held it like everyone else, clearly not understanding how Crohn's works at all. Others shared their own stories about IBS, colitis, diabetes, anxiety disorders that caused bathroom emergencies, and one mom wrote a long post about her daughter who got a kidney infection from holding her pee too long at a school with similar policies. Someone called me toilet boy, which stung more than I expected, and I closed my laptop and didn't look at the comments again. Friday afternoon, my chemistry teacher posted a statement on the school website about maintaining testing integrity and equal standards for all students, never once mentioning medical needs or accommodations. He kept using the word fairness like it meant treating everyone exactly the same regardless of their circumstances, like giving a kid in a wheelchair detention for not running laps would be fair. Mom read it out loud at dinner, getting madder with each sentence, especially the part about how allowing one student special privileges would undermine the entire testing system. That weekend, Mom started a petition for medical bathroom access, calling other parents and explaining the situation without mentioning my name directly. She got about 40 signatures by Sunday night, including parents whose kids had diabetes, anxiety disorders, menstrual issues, and other invisible conditions that made bathroom access crucial. One dad said his son held his pee so long he got a bladder infection. Another mom said her daughter bled through her clothes during standardized testing because she couldn't get to a bathroom for her period. Mom forwarded all these testimonies to Siobhan Pratt at the district compliance office Monday afternoon while I sat at the kitchen table doing homework. She typed furiously on her laptop, adding her own statement about watching me suffer for months without proper accommodations. Around 4:30, Mom's phone dinged with an email notification, and she gasped so loud I dropped my pencil. Siobhan had sent an official mandate to Principal Lynch with us copied, requiring immediate interim medical accommodations while the hearing was pending. The email used words like federal compliance and liability exposure that made Mom pump her fist in the air. Principal Lynch replied within 10 minutes saying he would review the request, but didn't actually confirm he'd do anything. Mom printed out the email chain and highlighted the key parts with a yellow marker, making 3 copies for our files. Tuesday morning, I had to go to the school to pick up homework assignments I'd missed during my suspension. Mom gave me the printed email to show if anyone questioned why I was there. The main office secretary looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but handed over the stack of papers without comment. I needed to use the bathroom before leaving, so I headed down the hall with the interim accommodation letter in my hand. The hall monitor, an older guy who always stood by the gym, stepped in front of me and asked where I was going. I showed him the district's email, but he just shook his head and pointed toward the principal's office. Principal Lynch made me wait 20 minutes outside his door, even though I could hear him on the phone talking about football scores. When he finally let me in, he glanced at the accommodation letter and said the district could recommend whatever they wanted, but school policy was school policy. I held it as long as I could, but ended up having to use the nurse's bathroom again while she pretended to organize medical supplies. That evening, Laurel came to our house with a legal pad and a folder full of notes about our case. She sat across from me at the dining room table and had me practice reading my statement out loud over and over. Every time I started getting angry or emotional, she'd stop me and remind me to stick to medical facts and documented incidents. The janitor telling him to stick to finding the key somewhere makes me wonder how many times he's had to protect himself from unfair blame before. She crossed out parts where I'd written about feeling humiliated and replaced them with clinical descriptions of symptoms and urgency. We practiced for 2 hours until my voice stayed steady through the whole thing, even the parts about almost soiling myself. She taught me taught me to pause after each major point to let it sink in for the panel members. Wednesday morning arrived way too fast, and my stomach was churning before I even got out of bed. The hearing was scheduled for 9 at the district office downtown, in a building I'd never been to before. Dad drove while Mom sat in the back with me going over my statement one more time. The conference room was freezing cold with fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. 3 administrators I didn't recognize sat behind a long table with nameplates I couldn't read from where I was sitting. They spent 15 minutes reading procedures about evidence submission and testimony protocols while my intestines twisted into knots. One administrator, a woman with glasses on a chain, explained we'd each present our case and then they'd ask questions. Principal Lynch went first, standing up with a whole presentation board covered in photos of the locked bathroom doors. He talked for 20 minutes about security protocols and the sanctity of testing environments without mentioning my medical condition even once. He showed security camera stills of me leaving classrooms and called it repeated violations of established procedures. He used words like theft and breach of trust and undermining administrative authority while pointing at charts about test score integrity. When he finally sat down, the panel members were all taking notes and looking serious. My turn came next and my hands shook, so bad I could barely hold the paper. I read each word slowly like Laurel taught me, explaining how Crohn's disease causes sudden, urgent need for bathroom access. I showed them the stack of doctor's notes dating back to the beginning of the school year that Principal Lynch had ignored. My voice cracked when I described the day of the chemistry final, but I kept going, explaining how I only used the key as an absolute last resort. I talked about keeping extra clothes in my locker and taking medication that made me dizzy just to try to comply with the bathroom schedule. The panel members looked less stern when I finished, and one of them was frowning at Principal Lynch. Next, my chemistry teacher joined by speakerphone, his voice tinny through the conference room speaker. He talked about maintaining testing standards and said anyone could claim they needed the bathroom to cheat. When one panel member asked if he'd reviewed my medical documentation, he said that wasn't his job, and students tried to game the system all the time. The woman with the glasses asked him directly if he'd read the accommodation paperwork in my file. He admitted he hadn't because he had over 100 students and couldn't read every piece of paper. That made 2 of the panel members exchange looks while writing more notes. My GI doctor called in next and spent 10 minutes explaining exactly how inflammatory bowel disease works in excruciating medical detail. He used terms like fecal urgency and intestinal cramping and involuntary bowel movements that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. He stated clearly that denying bathroom access to a Crohn's patient was dangerous and could cause serious medical complications. He mentioned the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and said the school was violating federal law. When asked about the severity of my condition, he said I had moderate to severe Crohn's that required immediate bathroom access when symptoms flared. The panel asked me directly where I got the key, and I stuck to my story about finding it on the ground. They pressed harder, asking why I didn't turn it in, and I said I was desperate and scared of being humiliated in class. I took full responsibility for making the copy, even though my parents shifted in their seats beside me. The panel members kept pushing, but I wouldn't change my story or implicate the janitor who'd helped me. Finally, Siobhan Pratt from the district office stood up and asked Principal Lynch why he'd denied accommodations for 3 months despite clear medical documentation. He started talking about zero-tolerance policies and security concerns, but she cut him off. She asked again why he hadn't followed the district's disability accommodation procedures that he'd been trained on every year. Principal Lynch stammered about having to maintain order and protect test integrity, but couldn't give a real answer about the medical issue. The 3 panel members were all looking at him now with expressions that ranged from confusion to disapproval. The panel members started whispering to each other while Principal Lynch sat there sweating through his shirt. They shuffled papers and pointed at different sections of my medical documentation while I picked at a loose thread on my jeans. My stomach was already cramping again from the stress, but I held it together by pressing my fist into my side. The superintendent kept shaking her head at whatever the lawyer was showing her on his tablet. After about an hour of this back and forth, with Principal Lynch getting called up twice more to answer questions about training dates and policy manuals, the superintendent finally cleared her throat. She said the panel had reached a decision and started reading from her notes. No expulsion since the medical emergency was documented. The 5 days of in-school suspension I'd already served would count as sufficient punishment for leaving class without permission. The chemistry exam 0 would stand, but I could do limited makeup work for partial credit if my teacher agreed. Most important, the school had to immediately start following proper medical accommodation procedures, including emergency bathroom access. It wasn't total victory, but it wasn't disaster either. Principal Lynch's face turned purple, but he couldn't argue with the district superintendent sitting right there. Walking out of that conference room felt like escaping from prison. The hallway was packed with students heading to lunch, and they all stopped to stare at me. Some kids gave me little nods or thumbs up, while others whispered behind their hands or looked at me like I was contagious. Laurel caught up with me near the main office and handed me a thick packet about next steps for getting an official 504 plan. She squeezed my shoulder for just a second before Principal Lynch came storming out and glared at her so hard she pulled her hand back. The next week was weird. The nurse gave me official bathroom passes that were supposed to work anywhere, but half the teachers acted like they'd never gotten the memo. The gym teacher made me wait while he called the office to verify my pass was real. The history teacher rolled her eyes every time I stood up. The hall monitor stopped me 3 times in 2 days, demanding to see authorization, even though she'd already seen it. Each time was exhausting, but I started carrying a notebook and writing down every single incident with times and names and what was said. My mom said we needed documentation in case things got worse. The chemistry makeup exam got scheduled for the following Thursday in 3 parts, with bathroom breaks built in between sections. During part 2, my intestines started their familiar stabbing pain, and I raised my hand. The proctor actually let me go without any argument, and even stopped the timer. I made it to the bathroom, dealt with the minor flare, and came back to finish the test. When I got the results back, my grade went from a 0 to a 67 97%, which wasn't great, but was way better than nothing. The janitor and I crossed paths in the hallway a few times, but we kept our distance. Just quick nods when nobody was looking. My cousin told me later that the janitor said he'd been questioned about his keyring and warned about security protocols, but they couldn't prove he'd done anything wrong. He still had his job, which was all that mattered. Imogen published her final article about the whole situation in the school paper the next week. She wrote about the new posted procedures for medical exemptions outside every bathroom and interviewed 3 other kids with different medical conditions who'd suffered during the lockdown policy. Principal Lynch got quoted saying the changes were just minor adjustments to existing procedures, not any admission that the original policy was wrong. 2 weeks after that, Laurel called me down to finalize my official 504 plan. The document spelled out emergency bathroom access, testing accommodations with scheduled breaks, extra time for assignments during flares, and even a direct hotline to the nurse's office. It wasn't perfect, and enforcement was still spotty depending on which teacher you had, but now I had legally binding protection that I could wave around when someone tried to stop me. As the semester wrapped up, my grades were damaged but passing. I'd figured out which teachers would respect my accommodations without making a big deal, and which ones would fight me every single time. Mrs. Peterson in English always let me go without even looking up from her desk. Mr. Rodriguez in math made me fill out a form every time. The Spanish teacher started keeping extra worksheets at her desk so I could grab them if I missed instruction time. The biology teacher moved my seat next to the door without me even asking. I still carried Imodium in every pocket and kept spare underwear in my locker and had wet wipes stashed everywhere. The bathroom key was gone, but the fight for basic dignity continued every single day. Well, folks, that's all for today's commentary session. Thanks for letting me wonder and question things right alongside you. Until our paths cross again. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.